Okay, so I want to yap about VR today, and I think I'm going to start with basically as the what I can furthest remember about VR. My earliest memory of VR starts with in back in 2015 when I would say like the first time I think that for me and for a lot of people that VR was seen as kind of a mainstream opportunity. And the most important thing back then, at least to me, was the Gear VR. At the time I had a Samsung phone, so this was like a no-brainer for me to choose to, to pick up something to like, have some fun. It was like $100 at the time, and I mean the future that it showed was looking very, very bright. I think that at the time there really wasn't a consumer grade um, opportunity for people to be able to access it. And given that a lot of people have Samsung phones, like it was like a no-brainer for people to try to get something. I mean, my dad had one too. He also had a Samsung phone at the time. It was a great opportunity to see what the future was looking like. At the time it was mostly just a tech demo though, so there really wasn't too much to show. There was like the most popular thing that I remember at least showing. Granted, my mind might be a little skewed because of lack of funds at the time. I was pretty young, so it's not like I could just buy every little thing that I could ever want on the Oculus store, whatever it was called back in the day. Um, but the most important thing, or sorry, the most popular thing that I would show people is like 3D pictures, because it was really cool to just show people, hey, like this is like, because it was an immersive experience for people to see places like they've never been before. Like the most popular one that I would show is like top of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, a lot of people, it's their dream to go to Paris, and the Eiffel Tower, obviously, being the landmark over there and being up there, it's heights or whatever scares some people, but it was fun. I would show people that they would get scared, they would feel like they're gonna fall over, whatever it is, and I mean it was fun, and got a little clap from it too. So why not, right? Used to take it back to school. Uh, show all the upperclassmen, become their friends and stuff like that. But the I would say back then again wasn't too much to do, but there was other VR headsets at the time as well. But I would say like, shortly after that is when we really saw, or before actually. I don't really know necessarily the timeline, but I mean this is I'm speaking from my own memory. But I remember shortly after that the PlayStation VR came out, and that was like the first time where it was, oh, like, other companies are taking this serious, because really we had only heard of Oculus. So Oculus had the Gear VR, then they had the Oculus Go, and then they had the Rift development kits that you'd see on YouTube and stuff like that. So Oculus was like the main thing that people heard about when you would hear VR. It was like the main thing that you would, the main company that you would think of. And then PlayStation came out with the PlayStation VR, and I mean, if the Gear VR was accessible, the PlayStation VR was just as accessible. A lot of people have PlayStations. Price was a little bit higher though, because obviously there was a lot more. It would use the PlayStation for processing power, but it was essentially just like a display, and I think it came with an extra processing unit. But this was console VR, and it was the first time again that like you would see. Actually, I don't want to say the first time because the Nintendo Virtual Boy was technically a thing, but we'll talk about the first thing that people really considered, because I don't think many people considered that a thing, or at least like a real attempt. I mean, it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was just a 2D, or actually it might have been 3D, but it was just a black and red image, right? And I mean, back then games were a little bit different back then too. But the most, the biggest takeaway that we got from PlayStation VR is that, hey, companies are going to consider this, bigger companies, and they're going to take it and run with it. And also, shortly after that, we ended up getting the Oculus Quest, right, which was the first standalone VR headset, at least first major standalone VR headset that people really like. Went out and bought. It was the first one that was like fully fleshed. I mean, you could buy someone one for Christmas, and there was no setup, no nothing. Most of the other headsets available at the time would either be tethered, or they were like severely, like, I guess, lacking in offering. What you could do on it. This one, you could really play games on it, like, really have fun with it. It felt like a full experience. It was, in my opinion, like the virtual reality equivalent of buying someone like an Xbox. You don't really need anything with an Xbox, versus having to buy a computer, having to buy whatever. It wasn't just an accessory anymore. It was a console almost, right? And then the next most important thing, or at least the next thing that I would say was a big turning point for VR as well, besides the Quest, because obviously the Quest has its own success story with the Quest 2, and the Quest 3. I have owned the 2 and the 3, and they're amazing headsets. I'm getting cooked. This is bad. But the Quest 3, I think, is probably the best headset available. And anytime anybody ever talks to me about VR, and I mean, it's not just the most polished headset, but also the most amount of value that you can get in a headset. And the 3S also really built off of that by giving it just a little bit cheaper, and also giving, what's it called? By giving it a little bit cheaper and taking away a couple of things that aren't super, super important for some people. I mean, you can find them on sales easily for like $300. I mean, it's a pretty insane value for what you get, considering I believe the Quest 3 was 500. But the one thing that I really do think about VR, at least in terms of the future of VR, I think that the future of VR needs to be focused on not necessarily just making it more immersive, but also just making the quality of the experiences better. I don't really think that there has been too many experiences that are like fantastic. Most of the VR games that come out feel like demos, you know what I mean? Like they feel like games that, okay, cool, it's created for VR, it's in VR, right? That's fantastic. A great example that I love, a game that I absolutely love, is I Expect You to Die, that trilogy of games, right? They're fantastic. They're super fun. They're super immersive and all that. But in the end of the day, it just feels kind of, I don't want to say like a tech demo, but they're short games where it's just, hey, here's a puzzle game, right? Besides like FPSs, there's not too many games that really work super well in VR. Half-Life Alyx is probably the best example of a game that you don't ever really feel like, okay, they made this game for VR. They don't really like it feels like a game that has no setbacks in terms of what it provides. It doesn't really ever feel like, oh, okay, this game, feels like, oh, it's a demo. Like, especially for the prices that they're charging for some of these VR games, right? And granted, they are getting better with some of these games. More games are coming out, and they're being more and more fleshed out, where they feel, hey, this game provides a lot of fun. There's a lot of replayability. There's a lot of whatever the case may be. But Half-Life Alyx is by far one of the most immersive games I've ever played. I genuinely, there was an opportunity, there's a part of the game where, truthfully, I have never felt more immersed in my life. I genuinely forgot I was in VR. I was so immersed that I, was like really like I was covering my breathing and stuff like that. I'm trying not to spoil, but there's a fantastic part of the game where you're hiding essentially from like a little monster or something, and you have to like duck and cover your mouth. You have to cover your mouth, and obviously the game picks that up and can detect your breathing. I guess obviously I'm assuming it's just like an input or something like that based off of the tracking. But that's a fantastic game, and that I feel like is a great example of a game, and I think that more people need to base their game off of that. I also think it's a great idea for Valve to come out with a new Half-Life game, because everyone was always asking for a new Half-Life game, that they came out with it and they put it out in VR. And I think for a lot of people, honestly, a lot of people probably bought the VR bought the Index because of the game. It was a fantastic game. Really, it really was. And I think it really showcased how good VR could be. And I think that and the Quest 3 are by far the most important things in VR that really show how good VR is. The Quest 3 is by far the best headset when it comes to VR in terms of value. You have a headset that can do, mixed reality, hand tracking, all these different chats, whatever you want. There's desktop VR that you can stream to it or tether it, and then there's standalone VR. There's just so much that you get from that, and I think that really set the standard for what should come with a VR headset and how good a VR headset could be. And then Half-Life Alyx is just the example of, hey, this is a borderline amazing game. Again, not just I clicked on accident. Not just an amazing game because it's in VR, but an amazing game because it's an amazing game. And I mean, I just wanted to yap a little bit about VR. I think it's something that I'm pretty passionate about, especially because I really do think that it is the future. I think that there is opportunities for it to become amazing. I think that, there's fantastic experiences with it. You show VR to somebody who's like above the age of, say 50. I'm not trying to like age shame or anything, but like you showed someone above the age of 50, I mean, they lose their mind, right? Like they genuinely enjoy it and love it. And it's just because seriously, it's advanced so much in, for example, just the last 10 years. I mean, again, like I show my dad it because my dad was really into it. Back when I was with the Gear VR and stuff like that. When I showed him the mixed reality and how I was like grabbing objects out of the air and I was like studying for exams with it and stuff like that. I mean, he couldn't believe it. It was super fun to just show him that. And yeah, eh, it's enough yapping.